Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which will see a pretty massive weekend domestically and worldwide with two brand new films, Wicked and Gladiator II, with Wicked expected to have a pretty massive opening weekend. Early reactions from it across the board seem to be mostly positive. Even people like Gary over Nerdrotic say, hey, the film is actually pretty good, however, it was hell for him, so it sounds very much like an objective versus subjective experience. Subjectively, he hated it, but objectively, he has to admit that there's a lot of polish to the movie that will probably end up bringing a lot of people out to go and see it, and will probably also make it one of the biggest releases of this year. I've been saying this for a while now that I thought that the last billion-dollar film potentially on the table was going to be a film like Moana 2. I still hold to that because right now, early projections for Moana 2 coming out next weekend seem to be pretty good. Wicked now is in that discussion as well. Wicked could become, as many have been now saying, the next Barbie. Could Wicked then be able to possibly bring a Gladiator 2 along for the ride, similar to what Barbie and Oppenheimer were able to do? Or is Gladiator 2's very long and sluggish runtime, and most especially just boring story? I saw that movie last night, and oh goodness, what a slog fest. Will that be enough to turn people off to have that potentially be one of the bigger flops of the year? It is still a little bit too early to tell on that one, but what we can say, going ahead and getting started here, is that Wicked projected to be a massive opening, and not just a massive opening, but also just a massive film worldwide. It's really not too much of a surprise here. Wicked is a pretty massive IP. This is a based off of a play, based off of a book, and it is a story that has been seen and heard by many people. Lots of people like the music to this musical. Lots of people have seen the show, and so do expect for massive crowds, both men and women, but more probably predominantly women, going to see this film. Again, kind of similar there to Barbie, but even with Barbie's more predominantly female audience, there was still a pretty large share of that audience that was indeed male, and so I think that will probably happen also for Wicked as well. According to Box Office Theory, they think the film will open to around $135 million domestically, so very impressive numbers there. In fact, we go ahead and open this up a little bit more as far as what the overall total tracking is looking like. Box Office Theory, shout out to Sean Robbins, who does really great work over there. He has been talking about this for a long time, and he thinks that right now his initial estimates were between $105 and $150 million opening for Wicked, with a total domestic run between $282 and $480, depending on where it opens this weekend. Since it seems like the film is definitely tracking towards a larger $130 million plus opening, we could probably suspect that it'll get closer to $480 million domestic total. That's again what's being projected as far as its total domestic run. So if this movie then is able to have a typical domestic international split, with that international being a little bit higher than the domestic, you can see why $1 billion is absolutely on the table for this movie. And I would say it's almost a foregone conclusion because of the early reactions, because of the early sentiments. Even though we obviously, who are in this space, those who pay attention, we know the nonsense that has been spouted by the lead actress who plays Elphaba, the Wicked Witch of the West, in this movie. We know all of the nonsense that has been said. However, most people don't know that. Just similar to Barbie, right? Barbie had so much nonsense in the movie and in the lead up to the movie, but when it comes down to it, a lot of general audiences, especially those female audiences, just do not really care about that and really just do not pay attention to that as far as at a large scale. And so we can expect something very similar with Wicked, and I think that Wicked will probably be able to withhold and withstand any potential people who might be, a little bit more in the know on this and say, ooh, I don't want to support something like that. But hey, doesn't really matter. The numbers are there clearly, and based off of these early projections, we can expect this film to be pretty massive. Going up just a little bit, you can see the range that they have on this movie, right? The early, traditional industry experts say over $100 million, and the Box Office Theory projections are now between 120 and 155 million. So every single week, this movie has gotten larger in its projections. And so do not be surprised if by the end of this weekend, we do have something closer to $150 million. It just would not surprise me at this point because of the kind of movie that it seems Wicked's going to be. And because you have those early reactions, the guys at Film Threat love the film, gave it like 8.5 out of 10. You have obviously people like Gary saying it's a good film, even though he hated it. And so I think that is going to be a lot of the women that I follow on social media in our space have all really almost universally said that they've loved the movie. And I think that is going to be a major factor going into the weekend. Even my wife is someone who is getting a little bit more hesitant when it comes to these adaptations of theatrical productions, and even she has some interest now in seeing this, and I know that I have some interest in seeing it now too, because I want to just see how much of a train wreck it could potentially be because of the CGI effects. But again, the fact that people are saying positive things about it makes me think, hey, maybe it won't be a bad adaptation. Can't say the same thing about Gladiator 2. So Gladiator 2 is a film where I think if it has any success, it's going to be purely because of Wicked. It's going to be purely because Wicked was able to drag its corpse along for the ride, because that's what Gladiator 2, it's a corpse of a movie. It's a film that should never have been made. It's a film that honestly feels a bit outdated in many ways because they spend so much money, especially on visual effects that just do not, for the most part, pan out. There's a sequence that happens very early on in the movie where there's a fight against these monkeys that don't even look like real monkeys. So it's very bizarre because, again, it's supposed to be based in reality and based in history to a certain extent, and then you have these creatures that almost look like they're alien in some way, and I was just very confused by the knowledge or by the adding of those things. But right now, that film projected to make around $65 million in its domestic opening. As you can see here, a total range of between 59 and 68, so a lot less than what Wicked's numbers are. But do not be surprised if Gladiator 2's either comes in higher or lower. And again, it's going to come down to two factors. Is the word of mouth, which I think is going to be pretty bad. Right now, Film Threat gave it like a 3 or 4 out of 10. You're getting a lot of people critical of this movie. I heard someone in the line last night say that it was really good, so you're going to have some mixed reactions. I would not be surprised, having seen this myself. It's a giant slogfest, put me to sleep very, very easily, and just kept me uninterested. I actually was looking at my watch. I almost walked out of the theater. That's how bored I was. I said, wow, I am truly wasting my time with this, and I do not care about any of the characters on screen. I don't care what happens to any of them, and that's never a good thing for a movie, especially a movie that has a 2.5-hour runtime. So do not be surprised if that holds some people back from seeing this movie. That being said, we had something similar happen. Obviously, Oppenheimer was a much better film overall. Nolan, a much more trusted name currently, because unfortunately Ridley Scott has kind of fallen by the wayside quite a bit with especially a lot of his more recent films. That being said, we do have still a name brand that might be able to bring some people out. But I do think the word of mouth would probably end up hurting this movie. But if Wicked is able to help it in any way, that would be the only reason I can think of that Gladiator 2 could potentially still survive this weekend. Also, Bonhoeffer comes out from Angel Studios. I have a copy of this that I still need to watch, but $2.5 to $5 million range there. So again, about a normal opening release for the Angel Studios brand. Not really going to be breaking the bank there. We're still not seeing anything even close to Sound of Freedom, but again, I don't think you will anytime soon, because that was just such a huge event, cultural film that exposed something that, again, a lot of people unfortunately are now no longer even talking about anymore, which is really, really sad. But when it comes back to Gladiator 2, again, $65 million projected opening for Box Office Theory. Number 3 spot to Red 1, dropping 59%. I would not be surprised to see it drop a little bit higher, because Red 1 is going to be a verifiable flop. Bonhoeffer at $4.4 million projected there. Venom, Last Dance, still hanging around at $3.7 million. Best Christmas Pageant ever at $3 million. Heretic at $3 million also. So again, a lot of holdovers going into the weekend. Next weekend will be interesting because it'll be the Thanksgiving holiday weekend, and I do suspect that you'll have not only a massive release for Moana 2, but also you'll have a lot of these other films doing pretty well. I think Wicked is going to really eat up most of the market, and that's what's going to be very interesting, is that once Moana 2 is out there, you're going to have those family audiences, right, that are going to going basically between Wicked and Moana, and so actually it won't even necessarily be a Glad Wicked or a Glicked, I think is what Film Threat has taught it. Like, I don't think you're going to have a Glicked weekend. I think you're going to have kind of a separated Wicked Moana weekend instead. So maybe a Micked weekend, right? Where you're going to have those two movies, I think, drive the most people out. And Gladiator 2 might get pulled along for the ride, but I think will ultimately be left in the dust because the film just really isn't all that good. Going over to Box Office Pro to see their projections, very similar here. Wicked, right now projected for them to get 120 to 140, so not nearly as bullish as the Box Office Theory numbers, which have it upwards of 150. I think that, again, 150 is not off the table for this movie once we get the early Thursday numbers, and I think that it'll probably be pretty high. I went to the theater last night. No one was going to see Gladiator 2. Everyone was going to see Wicked, so I would not be surprised to see that number come a little bit higher. For Gladiator 2, they have $65 to $75 million, so it seems to be a little bit higher there. Red 1, 13 to 18 million, the number 3 spot. Box Office Report now has their numbers as well. So Wicked, $121 million. million. I think they're being a little light on this movie. I do think the film will come in a little bit higher, probably closer to $150 million, but again, we'll have to wait and see. Gladiator 2 at $60 million sounds about that's pretty standard for what they're being projecting here. Red One 11.3. Again, I do think the film will have a steeper drop like this than the other box office theory is saying. Bonhoeffer 4.9 million, and so on and so forth. Looking at the numbers, as you can see right now, the chart is having a bit of a meltdown, just because the numbers sometimes goes through this where for some reason on the back end it just does not update. So I'll try and update that in real time to get some numbers. But what we can say is that when it comes to a film like Wicked, this film projected to have cost around $150 million. This was a two-parter. So this film had probably close to $300 million plus put into it to make the two parts being released a year apart from each other. And that just adds to it, right? If Wicked Part 1, and really, from what I've been told now, Wicked Part 1 is Wicked Act 1. So the film ends where Act 1 of the musical ends, which actually is a very sensible part to end it with. I think it's silly to have it into two parts, that have Act 1 be a 2-hour plus movie when Act 1 does not need to be that long, having seen the show myself. But still, they clearly knew that they had something going for them because, again, the numbers look like they're going to be pretty massive. This film needs to make, again, between $375 million and maybe upwards of $450, $500 million to break even. I think this film will easily do that, might even do that just or almost just in the domestic marketplace. And so this film definitely on pace to make money back. The big question mark in my mind is really over a film like Gladiator II. This film needs to make probably closer to $700 million worldwide to break even. And though it has already made around $85 million international, which seems to be a pretty strong international start, I think word of mouth will end up hurting this movie quite a bit. So the question is going to be, will word of mouth be the demise of this movie, or will the general sentiment, audience excitement over Wicked and eventually Moana, and again, more people just being physically at the theater, seeing the promotional materials for it, will that be enough to be able to potentially bring people out to save Gladiator 2 from falling into obscurity and into being potentially one of the biggest box office flops of the year? What we can say is that indeed, Red One will still be the biggest box office flop, if not one of the biggest box office flops of the year. Right now, currently at $333 million, has not broken $100 million worldwide as of yet. That will change this weekend, but that still will not be nearly enough to bring in any money. And obviously these charts will hopefully be working by Sunday for the box office breakdown. But what are y'all's thoughts? Do you think that Wicked is going to be just the biggest film of the year? I think that right now Wicked seems to have more momentum than Moana 2, but I do think that you actually could have a situation where Wicked, having a week earlier release, gets very, very, hot very early on. Moana then adds to the discussion. Moana 2 is able to then have a similar type of opening experience. And I think that you have Wicked hit $1 billion first, but I think Moana could potentially also hit $1 billion worldwide if the film is good, if it has good word of mouth, if it is able to have the same kind of magic that the first movie had, especially the magic with audiences. Then you could actually have $2 billion films being released within a week of each other going into the holiday season. And so this is something I don't think anyone really had on their bingo cards. I've been saying now for months that I thought Moana 2 was a sleeper hit because Moana is a huge brand. So many kids love Moana. And so I think that they made a very smart move financially to say, hey, let's take this series destined for Disney Plus obscurity and turn it into a movie. The question is going to be, did they do it effectively? Is it going to be able to hold audiences' attention? Is it going to be able to get past any positive, or negative word of mouth? And again, I think that right now it is poised to do pretty well with, again, the box office theory tracking, having it be between $77 and $89 million. I think that after this weekend of Wicked, I think you're going to see Moana 2 get well over $100 million next weekend. That's just my own general thoughts. And I think that you'll see those international numbers, and domestic totals also go up quite a bit. But let me know your thoughts about this or anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, loud that fire button over. Honestly, smash the rumble button. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, a blessed Friday, and as always, God bless. now for a huge special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members, starting off first with my people on Patreon, Father Luca Illich and Miss Martin Muses. Check out her YouTube channel by the same name, Miss Martin Muses. Also to my Subscribestar people, Matt317. Check out his Twitch channel by the same name, Matt317. And also to the K-Man. Check out his website, xtheboundaries.co. And lastly to my YouTube member, Mr. Roy. Shout out to you, good sir. And if you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below where you get access to that. Also, you get access to a plethora of other things. You get your name listed at the end of every live stream and video, like you saw in those names that came up before this video started. And also access to a giveaways channel that I host over on the Discord server where I give away 4Ks, Steelbooks, Blu-rays, all kinds of stuff. So check that out if you're interested in that. Also, I have an exclusive podcast that I hold at least once a month, and it's always a good time, and you get extra bonus content with that also. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, check out that top link in the video description below. You guys are all amazing, and beautiful people. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.